everybody. Thank you so much for attending. I know it's a Saturday morning. I'm very appreciative of you being here. My name is Irisneri Alicea Flores. You can call me Iris. And I've been a professional genealogist for about more than 3 years now. And so I've been in this wonderful journey of helping others, but I started actually about almost 10 years ago now. And like many of us, I got started with my own journey, which, as Sarah mentioned, I was very inspired by my maternal grandparents, who I'm blessed to still have today, and listening to their stories. But one thing that always attracted me was knowing more also about my paternal side, which is what really also motivated me to start. I did not know my grandmother from my paternal side because she passed when my dad was 10 years old. And as probably a lot of us have experienced in our Latino households, speaking about our past is not something that comes readily easy for some of our elders and for our families. So she was not someone I knew a lot about. And so then as I started this journey, one of the things that became so real to me was this saying: to connect with our past, we better understand our present and are more prepared for the future. This is something that became so important to me. And I understood so much more as I started this journey, as I hope if some of you have not started, hopefully after today, you will decide to start. This will motivate you to see how possible it is to start, which is one of the biggest lessons I learned when I started this journey. So one of the first actual documents that I ever and will never forget that I found about my paternal grandmother was her birth record. So this is actually a transcription of possibly of the original. And for the first time, I knew her second last name. I only knew her last name because it's my dad's second last name. I knew her parents' names. I actually grew up around some of my great-grandparents in my mother's side. So to know my great-grandparents' names now from her, and know that she was from Maunabo, which is in the eastern coast of Puerto Rico, I never thought I had any connections to that part of Puerto Rico. I always thought my part of, by the way, I am from Puerto Rico. I don't think I mentioned that. So I always thought I was Bayamon, Cataño, and Caguas, which for some of you that may be from the island, that's more in the northern part of Puerto Rico. Come to find out, I had connections in Maunabo, and it was just an amazing experience to be able to find that out, and then go to Maunabo for the first time and finally just see the places she saw. It just, for the first time in my 33 years then, when I first started, my abuela became real to me. Abuela became Abuela Faustina. So this is actually a picture of her. It's the only picture I have, so excuse all the graininess, but after I started sharing with my family what I was finding out, somebody did send me, my cousin actually sent me this picture of her, and I was able to see her for the first time. And now I know where I get my height. So, but one of the things about this journey that I also found out as I started, especially from Hispanic genealogy, I mean, there are amazing the amazing work that is being done by so many genealogists to preserve our history. A lot of us, I don't think, are aware of how that is happening, how it has been happening. So to find out that was an eye-opening experience. Also, there wasn't as much information out there, what to watch out for, what you need to look for, where you can go to find information. A lot of these things I learned by stumbling a lot. I actually started my genealogy and months after realized a lot of mistakes I had done and ended up deleting everything and starting from scratch. So this is really based on my experience on these steps. First of all, I'm actually going to go over the steps that I believe should happen before we get started. Because one of the things I saw was how overwhelming it can get. It can get surprisingly overwhelming by the amount of information you're probably going to start gathering really quickly, because it happens quick and then it kind of slows down as you get further up the tree. But also it's just, and all the emotions that come with it, because that's another thing that surprised me, and is how all the emotions, how empowered I felt by going into my island's history, because that's another important part of genealogy, is the historical research that you should do on the side. And also on a personal level, how it connected me closer to my family and was able to bridge gaps and empathize with my father in a way I never had before. See my grandfather as not just my grandfather, but the son that lost his father when he was 4 years old. My dad, who lost his mom at 10 years old. And it was a very eye-opening experience, which is basically how Descubre Tu Historia was born. That was the mission. I want to empower and start this healing process, because somebody very important said it to me. The power is in the wound. The healing is in there, in the wound, where we have to start. And it starts with, in genealogy, I think it's a gateway to get us started on that, connecting with our ancestors, connecting with our ancestral countries. So, how to start this journey? These are steps that I think should be taken before you jump on any platform of your choice. And I mean, such as Ancestry, Family Search, My Heritage, because I think with Hispanic genealogy, My Heritage has also been taking off a little bit more. So, but these are steps that you should take. So before you get started, if you're one of those people that likes to write, get a notebook on paper and likes to keep documents, have actual documents. I'm a combination. I have notebooks everywhere. Take a notebook. If you are a person that likes to keep everything electronically, start a folder in your computer. The first thing you're going to do, decide who you want to know the most about. And the reason I say this is because, and this is something that we don't think about, because we get really eager and you want to jump in and you want to start with all your grandparents, each of your grandparents. I did that. I absolutely did that, and really came to regret it, because one, I got overwhelmed. I started to confuse who was who from where. And I started to hit brick walls really early. So brick walls is when you just can't get any further. You just can't get more information on the next generation. And I just couldn't see what I was missing. And it was because I was just spreading myself out between all my grandparents. So that's when I also reeled myself in and said, okay, who do I want to know the most about? Of course, I want to know about everybody. But who is the person that keeps just coming, whose story keeps coming up for me, that I'm just like, yes, this is who. For me, that was my paternal grandmother, Faustina. And once I focused, so what helps when you focus, it helps you take your time and read the documents. It helps you not miss details in the documents that you definitely will miss if you start too much. And it helps you manage the information you're getting in a way that you're not going to get overwhelmed. But if you do get overwhelmed, you're able to walk away and come back and restart and just keep going where you left off. If you do that, if you start all at once, you are going to walk away and then you're going to forget where you were. And then it's just going to overwhelm you again, having to jump back in and go, oh my God, where did I start? So really decide who you want to start with. Who is that person? Whose story is, or what story is really the one that you just, there's always that one we always wonder the most about. Once you have started, or once you have decided, you're going to take that notebook or the document, whatever is easier for you. You're going to write down everything you know and everything you think you know. even that story that you might not think might be true, but it's what's the lore that's in the family, write it down, because sometimes in those stories are clues. So when you start looking into the documents, you're gonna start seeing pieces of those stories that's going to, it's like those little granitos de arroz, like little grains of rice that they're leaving you to kind of guide you through the documents. So write everything you know. Sometimes you will be surprised how much you do know. Sometimes we get stuck, oh, I don't know nothing. You'll be surprised. So you wanna, if you know the date and place of birth, great. If you don't, approximate years is okay. Once you start your Hispanic genealogy, you will see how common discrepancies in ages is. So it is okay if you don't know the exact dates of birth or year, because you will start seeing it. One of the things that's very, and the simple answer, honestly, it's because a lot of our ancestors, they had to go to the local, well, when civil registration started, they had to go to the local government office in town, or before civil registration, they had to go to the church. And some of our ancestors just simply did not live close enough to these places. They live in the mountains, and sometimes these roads were just not always passable, or it was just not possible for them to get to these places. So they would get to these places months. I've seen registration of births happen 10 years after the birth. So keep your minds open when it comes to the birth years. Date and place of death, if you know, approximate dates is okay. Place and dates of marriage, again, approximate dates are okay. Where do they work and live? If they had siblings, do you know any siblings' names? Write those down. Their children's names, if you know them, if you know all of them. And so just start to write all these things down in your notebook or in a document. Then the third step, and this is the one that sometimes everybody goes, oh, if you're able to speak to family members. So if you still have your abuelos and your abuelas, this is your time to go over there, go to them and talk to them and see if they're willing to give you some information. And you can just start a simple conversation with abuela, how was it when you were little, and in some cases you will see resistance. In some cases, especially when you start getting into the older time, when as they get older and times got harder, I find it sometimes they find it easier to talk about their childhood versus later on. You want to ask them if it's okay for you to record them. If they're willing, that's awesome, because that's more documentation for you. And obviously it's an amazing memory to have their voice recorded, or you can get them on camera. So those are things that you can do. You can just ask them about their childhood, about their parents. What was it like growing up in Puerto Rico in the 1940s? What was your relationship like with your siblings? All these, you can ask, there's so much you can ask. And I think as the conversation starts to flow, you will, that's another thing. If you see that the conversation starts to flow and they're just start talking, just let them talk. It's an amazing opportunity to just watch them and hear them speak. And then of course, I know there is the situations where some of us have a hard time having to talk to family or ask them information because they don't want to talk about the hard things that they went through. Because that's a lot. The reality is a lot of our family ancestors went through a lot. Just moving to another country is a traumatic experience. And so they are not so willing to talk about that trauma. And that is okay. I want you to understand that is okay. Don't take it personal. One of the things I have found that happened to me is that once I started to find a little bit of information, I would just throw it out there like, Hey, I found this out. Do you want to know? And as I started to share, the story started to come after that. So that is another way. So 3 might have to happen after 4. So 4, private family collections. And what do I mean by those? A lot of our ancestors or our ancestral countries were Catholic. So a lot of our family members or have a Catholic background, if they're not Catholic now, but at some point your family most likely was Catholic. So you might have seen a big Catholic Bible and you want to look in there. A lot of our family members would jot down very special life events in these Bibles. They would write down about baptismals, burials, about marriage records. Marriage events. I have one client that she had information up to 3 generations in that Bible alone. So that's one you want to look into. Pictures. I don't know about you, but my abuela has literally boxes and suitcases of pictures. And in these pictures, you would write down the names of people on the picture or the dates. And to be honest with you, if that is something you do with them, it's another conversation starter. It's another opportunity to grab more stories. So this is one of the things. So if you follow these steps, timeline, it's up to you. There is no, this is not a race. So this is something you take your time with, you do it as you can. But the fact is, at the end of these 4 steps, first of all, congratulations, because that means you literally have started your legacy. Okay? And you need to take that in, and you have started a step that the next generation is going to be grateful for. And so you really need to take that in and accept that. And it is an amazing accomplishment to be able to do that. After those, you have all that information. And another reason I think these 4 steps is really important is it starts to familiarize you with your family and your family's culture in some ways. And this is going to become very important when you start on a platform, because then you're going to start getting a lot of hints or leaves, depending on what platform you're on. Leaves are from Ancestry. And you're going to start seeing a lot of documents. And it's going to be easier for you to distinguish who's your family member or who's your family. So one of the 2, so once you have all of this, I'm really going to focus a lot on Family Search. And the reason being is because Family Search, 1, is free. It's a free platform. And it's readily available. So once you are done here, if you want to start, you can literally just jump, and you've done all of the other stuff already, and you can literally just jump on Family Search. And I truly think for Hispanic genealogy, even if you go onto Ancestry, even if you go to any, you need Family Search. Family Search is really the hub where a lot of our Hispanic collections are, the searchable and the ones that are not yet searchable. So in other words, that you actually have to go into the collections and look at the images. So Family Search has these wiki pages. So these wiki pages they give you information. So for example, they'll give, if you search Puerto Rico, genealogy wiki. So you're gonna put your country's name and then make sure you put genealogy wiki if you Google. And it's gonna give you a really good idea of what is available. I think this is one of the ways to start, to get out there to see what's out there as far as documents. Again, basically doing those other 4 steps makes you very familiar where your family is, what towns, possibly by that time you have a good idea on the town. So Puerto Rico, you want to narrow it down to the town. Mexico, you want to narrow it down as much to the state. And all the other countries of are of South America, Central America, and Caribbean. You want to narrow it down to the state or province as much as possible. And if you do those 4 steps, you should at least be able to narrow it down. So Family Search will narrow it down for you. So if you are from Arecibo, Puerto Rico, you can actually Google Arecibo, Puerto Rico genealogy wiki, or go to the Puerto Rico main page genealogy wiki page, and you will be able to click on Arecibo, and it will tell you what is available specifically for Arecibo, tied to Family Search, but also these wiki pages will also include information on Facebook groups that might be available, genealogical societies that are out there, library archives, their how to reach them, their contact information. I mean, these wiki pages have a lot of information. And I think it's a great way to just sit down. I would say sit down calmly and take your time and go through that wiki page. All right. There are other resources available. Like I mentioned, there are Facebook groups. There are really good genealogy Facebook groups out there. I belong to quite a few of them, and you just want to look for, whichever country you're researching and see if there's a genealogy group out there. I mean, these genealogy groups are so helpful that literally somebody will post, hey, I need help translating this document, or I need help, I don't know what this word is. So you definitely, when you get out there, when I get out there, normally I'm like, oh, I can help this person. And then everybody else they've had like 20 comments already. So they're already been helped. That's how helpful they can be. So I definitely invite you to, if you have Facebook and you have social media, Facebook groups are very helpful. There are the genealogical societies, where a lot of our countries do have genealogical societies. You want to check those out. Some of those, the wiki pages sometimes will have information. La Sociedad de Genealogía de Puerto Rico is, Sociedad Puertorriqueña de Genealogía is amazing. This amazing group of Puerto Ricanos are doing amazing work and really preserving our history. And it is incredible, all the work they're doing. They actually put volumes of genealogical research out there that you can go and buy. So for example, they just finished a huge project, so be on the lookout for this. They just finished a big project on documenting 8,000 ancestors that came from the Canary Islands. So that's actually going to be going to print, and then they'll put it on their kiosco part of their website, where you can actually buy the volume. Just to let you know, it is limited amount. So as soon as you see that, definitely get on it. Another thing that a lot of people are not aware. So Family Search is run by the Family History Library in Salt Lake City. The Family History Library has family history affiliate libraries, such as Plainfield, and family history centers. All right, so literally, what's the family history affiliate libraries? That's your local public library. Not all local public libraries are affiliate libraries. So you do want to call and double check with your public library, see if they are an affiliate library. But you still want to check. Some of these libraries still have memberships that they have with Ancestry, MyHeritage, and they also use Family Search. Family Search is a free platform. But like for Ancestry and MyHeritage, if you log into their network you'll be able to use those services for free, but you do have to go to the library and use those on their network. But it is another resource. It's another amazing resource. So there is the affiliate libraries, because they're amazing. The family history affiliate libraries, a lot of them have genealogists on site sometimes that do volunteer their time and are able to help. And also there are certain collections that can only be viewed on the network of those affiliate libraries, and you can view them from home. So I will show an example of that. And the family history centers are definitely connected directly to the family history library. And so if you don't have a public library close to you that is an affiliate library, then you want to search for a family history center. And there is the PARES. Those are the Spanish digital archives online, also free, that you can search. So if you've done a little more research and you've already found a possible migrant ancestor, which means the ancestor that came from overseas to your country, or from Spain in this case, you want to jump on PARES and start a little and search and see if you're able to find more information. They have archives that go back pretty far, and I mean, I'm talking about 1500s, 1600s, and you want to see if you're able to find information. Just so you know, PARES, the search engine, you know, less is more, and I think it's the same for all these platforms. In other words, don't put full names and all the information, because sometimes that this is just, I don't know what happens. The search engine just doesn't, and it will say it has no information, versus if you just put maybe the first and the last name and maybe the country's name only, all of a sudden all this information pops up. So you kind of sometimes have to play around with the search engine. And this is the link for family search, but I will show you what it looks like, so you are able to find your local family history center and also your local affiliate public affiliate library. All right. Now, for tree building platform, for web-based tree building platform, I personally use, I'm not affiliated, excuse me, with Ancestry, but it is one that I use along with Family Search. But again, as I said before, I do feel that even if you go onto Ancestry, because of course it is, I do find it, as far for me, as tree building is concerned, I do find it more user-friendly, and you're able to do multiple trees. I really like that feature that I'm able to do a whole bunch of trees. So with Family Search, you can only do one tree. But you're going to need Family Search alongside. I am constantly with Ancestry. I have Family Search on at the same time. And Family Search is usually the main place where you're going to find a lot of information. And then I just upload into Ancestry. So what are the different types of records in our case? So in most of our countries, civil registration, that is when our life events started to be recorded with the local government or state government. In most cases, just the local municipality government. So that is when our ancestors would go, or even now, as you all know, we go, or now it's more, like technology has made it more, we don't really have to go physically there, but back then they would have to go physically to the local government office and register either a birth, a death, or a marriage. And before civil registration, all these life events were recorded by the Catholic Church and were kept by the Catholic Church. So you are going to start seeing first, well, when you start your research, you're going to start with the most current relative, and then you're going to work yourself. You're going to work your way up. You're not going to start right away with the relative. So if your questions about your great grandmother, mother of your paternal grandfather, you're not going to start with her right away or with him. You kind of want to start a little bit sooner with your parent, and then kind of work yourself up. And you're going to hit civil registration first. So in a lot of our countries, civil registration started in the late 1800s, in some cases even early 1900s. But I have seen Dominican Republic, I've seen some start very early on in the 1800s in other countries. What happens basically once you start hitting ancestors that were born or passed or were married before civil registration, then you want to jump onto church records. So Birth and death. In the case of the Hispanic genealogy, what information can you get from these documents? And this is a general. It may vary. Please note that this may vary a little bit depending on how things were being recorded in the town and the country you're from. But I've seen this format, or this month, this is the information that you could generally get from these records. So birth records. I have seen, so in birth records, you can get information on the parents, of course, such as where they were originally from, where they were currently living at the time of the birth. You can get information on what they were, what they did for work. And one of the most amazing things, you can get maternal and paternal grandparents information. And if they're still living at the time of, it will tell you if they're still living. It will tell you, in some cases, it will tell you what they did for work, if they're still living, and where they're currently living. And that is an amazing way to start tracing your ancestors. Death records. In death records, I have seen you can get sometimes, specifically in Puerto Rico, I've seen that in the form does allow for maternal and paternal grandparent information, all into the 1920s. Then the form changes a little bit after that, but you can, again, get information about the deceased, such as what they did for work, who were they married to, and sometimes it will list the children. And that will bring me soon to my next point. Marriage record. Also, sometimes it will have information if the person was previously married. It will have information on the previous marriage, why it ended. Sometimes it will have information on why it ended, when it ended, and what children were from that marriage. This is particularly for me, this is something that helped me for one of my family members. It was not clear to me, my great-grandfather, Irisneri Alicea, it was not clear to me if he was the son of Lope Alicea or was he the son of Miguel Montañez? Because in the 1910 census, he appears as Senin Montañez. Well, and it did this, please note, this did happen a lot. Our ancestors sometimes either lived in a common law marriage or married well after. So my second great grandparents actually married 20 years after all the children were grown, and their marriage record, finally answer the question, their marriage record actually stated that my second great grandmother, Anastasia, was married before to Miguel Montañez and had two children, Francisco and Antonia Montañez. And those are actually her two eldest children, which I already had. So I was able to clear up that mystery. But see, this is how, and it's very different from other types of records in other types of genealogy. And another very important thing about Hispanic genealogy, because these civil or these records tend to have information on maternal and paternal grandparents, it is important to identify the great aunts and uncles. It is important to identify their children. And basically their children, when you go into the grandchildren, you want to really just focus on the vital records, the birth, maybe some of the death records, mostly the birth or baptismal, because they will contain, sometimes they will contain information on the maternal and paternal grandparents. That helps me when I can't find a death record, or the date range of a death is so big that I can't just determine, you want to narrow it down at least to 10 years if possible. And putting those records in chronological order allows me to trace them. So because of tracing their children's records, plus the vital records for their grandchildren, I can narrow down sometimes a death to 5 years. So like I have a child, their child married in 1901, and it says their parent living in whatever town. Then in 1905, their grandchild was born. and it says that grandparent is no longer living. So I already know that means between 1901 and 1905, they passed. And that gives me a date range to try to focus a search on a death record. So before civil registration, then you go to church records. That's where, and you're going to look into those baptismal, those marriage and burial records. A lot of the church records for our Hispanic countries have been digitized by Family History Library. And some of them are not searchable. So in other words, when you go into family search and you just enter the name, it's not going to pull up. This means you're going to have to go into the actual collection and look at the images. So in the baptismal records for some of these, you're going to have grandparent information. Some I have found in Mexico, I have found in Jalisco specifically, that once you get into the 1700s, it really does not have, most of the time you won't find grandparent information on the baptismal records. But specifically for Mexico, Jalisco, in the Jalisco area, I know they have uploaded engagement records for the church records. And those are very, very helpful. Please note, all these records from civil to church records, the accessibility to them is going to vary from country to country, from town to town within the same country, because it really, some of our churches and the areas where these forms were, or where these records were kept, were really affected either by war, battle, or weather. So there will be gaps in some of these. There will be year gaps. In some of these church records may have sadly been lost. I know, for example, Orocovi in Puerto Rico, most of those church records, if I'm not mistaken, were lost. Manatí, Puerto Rico, there are just some burial and marriage records that were preserved, but for the most part, those church records were lost. So you are going to run into those gaps. Also, for Puerto Rico, the Diocese of Arecibo, the churches that belong to the Diocese of Arecibo and Mayagüez did not have Family History Library come and digitize their records. We're all hoping and praying for the day that it happens. But there are still a lot of church records available for other towns. And I will show you where to go. So these are some of the, especially for those people that Spanish may not be your first language. These are just one of the things that, one thing I can tell you is a lot of these records have very similar formats. So once you start looking at the records and you start getting very familiar with the format. Once you get familiar with the format, and you're going to see these are words that are pretty consistent in the records. Even when I've gone into Dominican Republic, Mexico, and Panama, and I've seen some in Ecuador and Chile, even when you go into some of these, it's pretty consistent. Obviously, we know padre, madre, father, mother. Abuelos paternos, that's paternal grandparents. Maternos is abuelos, is maternal. Okay, when it says originario, originaria, that means that is where they were born. So when it says originario de Bayamón, Puerto Rico, that means they were originally from Bayamón. They were most likely born in Bayamón. When it says vecino, vecina, which I have seen this commonly in Dominican Republic and in Mexico, it means that's where the person is currently living. So it would say, originario de Bayamón, Puerto Rico, vecino de Ponce. They were originally born in Bayamón, but they are currently living in Ponce. So that is what that means. So it's not neighbor. I mean, it means neighbor of Ponce in a way. So that means, yeah, but not neighbor like, hey, neighbor, can I have your shirt or something? So it has a different meaning even for us that speak Spanish fluently. So and I don't, this is another way, I don't want you to get discouraged because Spanish may not be your first language. Those Facebook groups can be extremely helpful. And everybody is, I mean, I've never seen any shaming or anything like that. So everybody has always been very helpful. Nacimiento means birth. Matrimonio, matrimony or marriage. Muerte, death. Then you have padrinos, means godparents. Viudo, viuda, widower. Then hijo, hija, son or daughter. Then you're going to run into terms like legítimo and legítima right here. These are important. So when it says the son or daughter is legitimate, that is a clue that their parents were married, which means that if you can, you should be looking for that marriage record. You can try to look for that marriage record. And this is important because was very common, again, for our ancestors to live in common law marriages and not be married. So if you see hijo natural, hija natural, that is an indication that your ancestor was actually, their parents were not married. So the chances are you're not going to find a marriage record. So you don't want to go in looking for a marriage record you're not going to find. Peninsular, these are terms that sometimes you will see in some of the records. So peninsular usually, especially I've seen this one used in Puerto Rico, means someone that was directly born from Spain. So in some records you will see they will say, especially in Mexico, will say, oh, español o española. It means somebody from Spanish ancestry, but doesn't necessarily mean that's the migrant ancestor. Doesn't mean that's the ancestor that came from Spain to Mexico. It just means they're from Spanish ancestry. Isleños was a term that was usually used for people that were from the Canary Islands. So that is, if you're interested in identifying your Canary Island ancestors, that is one term that was used for them. Then, as a lot of us might be aware, there's the Spanish caste system, which has a lot of different terms for people of mixed backgrounds, which is the case for many of us. Before I go into these, please, these are just terms that you're going to see in the documents. It is a reality of our past. So excuse me if you are, please excuse me if you are offended, or these are a little hard to, but it's just, these are terms that were used, and these are, if you see these in your documents, means that you are starting to get closer to identifying either your indigenous ancestors or your African ancestors. So mestizo, mestiza is a term where a lot of us are very, might be familiar to, is to describe someone of mixed European and indigenous. I know in Puerto Rico later on, it gets a little bit confusing because a lot of that determination was left up to the person doing the registration, especially 1900s on. So you might see an ancestor kind of like be in one document might be described as mestizo, and in one document described as mulatto or mulata. Mulatto and mulata typically describe someone of mixed European and African. Blanco, blanca is white. Bozal was a term that was used. A lot of these caste system also you will see them mostly in the church records, in the earlier records, is a person that was born directly from Africa, that came directly from Africa. I've seen those mostly in Puerto Rico. Coyote and lobo o loba was used. I've seen these mostly in the church records in Mexico, is a person of mestizo and indigenous background. And lobo loba is an indigenous or African heritage. There are many different terms for the caste system. And if you want to know a little more about that, I do have this website here. All right, so there are cautionary tales when it comes to genealogy research. Please, if you're able to, because in some cases, the image of the document may not be available, but if the image of the document is available, open the document, read the document. In the indexed information, so when you go into Ancestry or to Family Search, there's this preliminary information that comes up that tells you a little bit of what's in the document. Sometimes there's a lot of misspellings, and there can be some, I've even seen parents or grandparents put in as parents. And because obviously I get to know the family really well, I'm like, wait, hold on. And I'll open the document. Sure enough, that information was wrong. It is my family members, just that they had the grandparents listed as parents in the indexed information. So you want to read the documents. You want to open up. So if you see an indexed information, you're like, well, doesn't quite match, but a little bit. Open. Don't disregard it. Open it and read it. I put this at number 2, but this is a big one. When you go onto these other platforms that do have other members' trees, and these members' trees will come up as hints in your tree, or your tree specifically, like Ancestry, and be very careful about attaching information from other members' trees. So, and the reason why is because sometimes there's like a chain that happens of people attaching, oh, wait, that person has my family. Oh, no. If you see a person's members tree, another person's tree, and you cannot see the sources that they used, or pictures of the images of the documents, don't attach that information. Maybe keep it to the side. You can send a message to the person just to double check. Hey, I just was wondering, where did you get that information? But I wouldn't. One of the biggest, Eager Beaver over here, when I first started, that was one of the first mistakes I did. I just started. Obviously, when I got to there was a point where I was like, this just doesn't seem right anymore. And sure enough, once I reeled myself back in and started reading, I got maybe as far as my second great grandparents in this line and realized everything was wrong. So what I had grabbed from that tree, and then possibly what that person grabbed from that other tree, and from that other tree, and from that other tree, it was wrong. So be very mindful. I'm not saying completely ignore them. Sometimes when I've hit brick walls, I'll kind of look. If somebody comes up as a hint, I'll look to get a clue. But if I can't find an actual document, if I can't find an actual source to confirm that information, I do not attach that tree's information. So be very mindful. If you are not 100% sure if a certain document belongs to your ancestor, save it, don't attach, and wait to find more evidence, okay? History research. There is no way we can't do genealogy without history research. History research many times is what gives us a lot of clues on where to go next, especially when we've hit a brick wall. And especially when it comes to our indigenous and African slave ancestors. It's one of the ways that you're able to kind of fill in the gaps a little bit of that history, and can give you clues on where to go if there is another way to go. So history research, and it also gives you great insight. Sometimes if you're not able to, you hit that brick wall, you're not able to go any further, history research will give you a good idea of what your ancestors still went through. It still can give you a lot of great information on what your ancestors lived and saw. There was one person that I was not able to go any further, but it was clear their family lived during the time of Grito de Lares and the rebellion in Puerto Rico, in Lares. So they were able to get a grasp of what the family, the times the family was living in, and how that might have affected them. So it's very important. In the documents, be very mindful on who is the informant, and also the witnesses and godparents. And the reason being, sometimes the informant, most of the time, these people were close relatives. So if you're trying to identify more relatives, this is one of the ways, so it can help. And sometimes the credibility of the information. I have seen in some registrations where the neighbor is actually the one that does the registration of a birth or a death. So and you see some discrepancy in the record, well, maybe that's what it is. And so you want to sometimes take some of, then it starts to really, you're like, okay, well, the neighbor was the one that informed this. So maybe let me just put this to the side, note it, but let me see if I can find some more information to corroborate or to just not, or to prove it wrong. Another thing I missed from the words that I forgot to include here was when you see the word compareció o se presentó, that means the person that, the informant, the person that physically appeared and gave the information. And that's usually around the first paragraph of the documents. And so, yeah, this is, this is basically it. But, oh no, actually, oh my goodness, I forgot one of the most important. So I'm actually going to jump into family search really quickly. And I'm going to show you, highlight different areas for you to go in family search and start looking and finding collections. So here. I'm going into family search. Let me just move the bar a little up here. Okay. So in family search, when you go in, you want to go to search. Okay. You're going to records. This is one of the places. Actually, let me go back on that. Let me start with the wiki page. So you go to search. You either can Google, like I mentioned, or once you go into family search, you're going to go to research wiki. Okay. So for example, let's do Mexico. As you can see, there's all kinds of information. I usually like to start with the main page. So this is the main page for the Mexico wiki page. And you can see all kinds of information that they have. Mexico online genealogy records. Ask the family search. You can also ask them for information. So see this map right here. As I try, if you know the state, that's the best way to start. So if I go to Jalisco, then I get more specific information about what is available for Jalisco. It gives you a bit of history. So this is why, sit down, take a moment, and read all this information. So I don't want to make you dizzy by scrolling, but so for example, online digital records for civil registration. So these are the civil registration records that are available for family search, specifically for Jalisco. Then if you keep scrolling down, it's going to give you information on the church records. And as you can see, there are church records for Jalisco. And I've been able, in Jalisco, I've actually been able to see church records that go back to the 1600s. So this is one of the ways to be able to go get a good idea of what is out there. There's all kinds of, if you go to here, Mexico online genealogy records, it gives you more what's out there online, even of what's out there in My Heritage, at Ancestry. So it is extremely great information. All right, another way. I honestly hit all these areas all the time, doesn't matter. Go to records. You can obviously start here. I just love to jump over here. It says find a collection. I go to browse all collections. So you can see Dominican Republic. So here it's going to give me all that is available, searchable in some cases, for what is available through here for that is searchable for Dominican Republic. And we have some baptismals, some births, civil registration, goes back to 1801 in this case, and other miscellaneous. So this is extremely, they have church records. One of the things I like to go to the wiki page is because, again, you can narrow it down by province, and it's helpful when you can narrow it down more. And another important place that I like to go is the catalog. All right. So the catalog, so for example, I'm going to use Arecibo, Puerto Rico as an example. Actually, no, let me use Lares. Let's go to Lares. So Lares, Puerto Rico. I like to leave it at any because I like to get an idea of what's available generally. Just sometimes I have found what doesn't pull up in the wiki, doesn't pull up in the collections, will pull up, you know, they kind of, by going to the three, you kind of get a more general a better picture of everything that might be available. Sometimes what doesn't pull up in the wiki will pull up in the catalog. So if you go, I leave it at any, but you can do a search for what's online alone, or you can do a search for the closest family history library or center that's near you and see if what you're looking for is available there. So I leave it at any. It turns out for Lares, so as you get, these census records do not come up in the browse all collections, but they come up in the catalog. And these are actual census records for Lares that happened before Puerto Rico was part of the, was acquired by the United States. This was when Puerto Rico was still part of Spain. And they go back in some cases to 1842. And when you see this, the camera right here, that means you are able to go in and look at the collection. I'm actually going to go back and show another example. So Arecibo, Puerto Rico, is part of one of the dioceses that hasn't had their collections digitized. But it turns out that there are some extracts available. So right here, we have some from Arecibo, Uguado, but as you can see, there's a camera and a key. That actually means that you can't view it from home. It will prompt you that you might have to go to a family history center or a family search affiliate library. And actually, if you click on any of them, it is going to take you to the map. So all those blues, as you can see, the family history centers are all over the world. And the libraries are all over there's affiliate libraries all over the world. And as you narrow down, it populates even more. So I'm actually gonna narrow down to New Jersey. So all the blues are family history centers near you, and all the reds are public libraries that are affiliate libraries to the Family History Center. And if you go into each one of them, it will give you how to contact them, you know, the hours that they're available. So this is extremely helpful. Then you're able to, you know, you can check, you know, call them, I would say, let them know what you're searching for and see if you're able to watch or to see that collection, have access to that collection. So I do hope this has helped a little bit and give you more insight on what is available, what is possible out there. And I would love to open it up for questions.